Hey everybody, Matt here for AVC and welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be installing a simple water system. Let's get to work. Today we're going to be installing a simple water system, and what that means for us is it's just going to be cold water. So in this van, we have a really simple build out. We want a sprayer at the back of the van so we can hose ourselves down, hose down a dog, hose down our gear, fill up a water bottle, whatever those needs may be. But since there's no kitchen in here, we're not worried about plumbing up to a kitchen and to a faucet in the front of the van. If you plan to put a kitchen in the front of your van and you want to install a cold water system like this, all these same principles are going to apply, so stay tuned and let's get this job done. Before we get to work, let's take a look at the parts we're going to be using for this cold water system. So first and foremost is our Icon water tank. I've tried a lot of different water tanks in the past, and I think Icon is a really nice, high quality tank that doesn't leave a lot of plastic taste in there, so I'd love sticking with this brand. Now we're using an 18-gallon tank, and that's designed to specifically mount inside of our DIY utility cabinet. To deliver water to that tank, we're going to be using the Aqua RV inlet. We really love this Aqua stuff here because it's toolless. We don't have to worry about anything. We plug in our fittings and we can fill up our tank without worrying about any leakage. Powering our water system is going to be a SureFlow water pump. This is a 12-volt, 55 PSI pump. I found that this works really well for just about everything in a van that I ever needed to do. The last piece I want to touch on is our pre-filter, and that's just to protect our pump. So this just filters out debris and makes sure we don't get any kind of junk in the baffles of our pump. It is definitely not for water quality, so just keep that in mind when we design our system. Our first step is going to be preparing some of our parts before we install them in the van. Let's prepare our water tank with the correct fittings to set up our system. There are 4 connection points on the end of our Icon tank. The first one here with the red cap is our gravity water fill, and we're actually not going to be using this as part of our system. The next half-inch fitting here at the top of the tank we're going to be using for our vent, and then the bottom 2 half-inch fittings we're going to be using for our water fill and our water supply. So the water fill is going to go directly from our Aqua into the tank. From our supply, it's going to go out through our pre-filter and into our pump, and then our vent is just going to go outside the van, so we have an overflow and an air vent to allow displacement in the tank. Let's start by capping our water fill. I'm going to be using a 1 1/4 inside diameter vinyl hose. I'm going to slide that over the top. I'm going to be putting on 2 pipe clamps here, and then I'm going to be using a 1 1/4 PVC cap to terminate this connection. Tighten all these in place, and we're done with that step. With our gravity fill capped, we're ready to move on to our half-inch threaded fittings. Now, for the half-inch threaded fittings, we're going to be putting on 2 different types of connectors. This is a barbed fitting, and we're going to be using that for our vinyl hose here at the top of the tank. And at the bottom of the tank, we're going to be putting on a brass PEX fitting. Now, when you're inserting brass into a polyvinyl tank like this, just be really careful to make sure the threads get seated properly. It's really easy to strip out those threads with a brass fitting like this. I worked for a plumber in college, and he taught me to always tape and dope all of my fittings. This is the way he did it, this is the way I was taught, so this is the way I always do it here at AVC. Now I'm going to be applying that thread tape as well as some thread sealer to all of my fittings before I insert them into the tank. Now remember, when you install that pipe thread, you got to make sure you wrap it in the direction that the threads tighten, so that as you're tightening this in, it's not unraveling that thread tape. Our fittings are in place on our tank, and let's go ahead and set this in place so that we're ready to start our next step. Now, if we look at the bottom of our pump, we can see an arrow here, and that's just going to show us the direction of water flow through there. So we want to put our pre-filter on that low pressure side of the pump. I refer to anything that's supplying the pump as a low pressure side, and anything coming off of the pump as a high pressure side in the van. So we can just twist on this pre-filter onto the pump, and that is ready to go. It has a nice rubber seal in there, so we don't have to worry about any tape or dope, anything like that. To make the connections to my pump, I like to use these SharkBite brand fittings with a rubber seal on them. I prefer a rubber seal whenever I can, but whenever I can't do a rubber seal, that's when I'm going to do my tape and dope. Now this connection actually is available in a straight fitting as well as an elbow fitting. I'm going to use 2 elbow fittings on both sides of this pump. The last bit of pre-work we're going to need to do is put our PEX fittings onto our Aqua RV inlets. We're ready to start setting up our fittings in our utility cabinet so we can start running our plumbing. And we can see that our utility cabinet here has been pre-drilled for one of our water fills, and that's because our utility cabinet is designed with this Aqua fitting in mind. So this can just push right into that open spot, and it lines up perfectly with our water fill here at the tank. Now, if I want to add a second Aqua, I'm going to have to drill a hole in the side of my utility cabinet. Let's get that done. I have a 1 1/2-inch hole saw mounted into my drill, and I marked out a location on my utility cabinet that's directly above my water fill, so they look nice and intentional. We're going to drill this out from the front. I'm going to use that centering point on the inside, and I'm going to drill it out the other half from the inside out. That way I don't get any blowout or chips in my utility cabinet. Just get a nice clean hole on both sides. Perfect. We're ready to install our Aqua water system fittings, and I made up these little labels for them so that we can keep the 2 different systems straight. This one is going to be labeled our water fill, and The one above it is going to be labeled fresh water. Now that our aquas are installed, we're gonna have some sharp barbs on the inside of the van here, and I just like to use their drywall anchors that they supply with them and go ahead and cap those off. You could cut these if you want to. I take the easy route and just cap them off and leave them in place. Our next step is going to be getting our tank secured in its location. And we do have some room to move the tank forward and backward if we needed to. I'm gonna mount it right above this rear support, because I think that's gonna give me enough room to do all my plumbing fittings here, but give me a little bit of secret storage up front if I want that there. I'm gonna use a battery retention strap, these little metal cleats here, and then a longer section of strap, and we'll link those in the description below. Before we get our pump mounted in place, we want to put a hole through our floor all the way outside the van so that we can drain our system outside the van as well as vent our system outside the van in case we get some overflow. So I'm going to just loosely place my pump into its location, and I like it right here. And then I have a reference underneath the van that is one of the bolts here for my L-track. So I can measure above the van and measure to my floor, and then I can get underneath the van and I can measure from that same bolt and make sure everything is nice and clear so that I can put a hole in the floor system. I like my pump in this location right here. It's behind the wall. It's arranged so that all my fittings can come up through this hole here, which means I want my system drain to be back here in this back corner. Now I can measure from the bolt and my L-track over into this corner, and I have about 10 inches here. So I think this is gonna be a good spot to get my drain out the floor of the van and drain all my system components outside the vehicle. Our hole's in place. Cabinet should be complete and ready to go. Let's get this pump mounted. All of our pieces are in place now, and we're ready to start running our PEX lines. Now, I'm just gonna get to work here, but I'm gonna explain to you what I'm gonna be doing. So our water fill here is gonna go straight into our tank, and that's gonna fill our tank. From our supply side, it's gonna come out of our supply, come down through the hole in the base unit here, and then into the intake side of my water pump. Out of the water pump, it's gonna flow out of here, up through this opening, and then into the aqua fitting here at the back of our van. All of our PEX runs are now in place, and I'm really happy with the way that everything worked out here. Very simple, which is awesome. That's exactly what we're going for. I did want to show you one thing. If you were going to tap off of this and bring a water line up to your kitchen, this is exactly where you would want to do that. I would just take a T like this. This is my high pressure side of my water line, and then I would just put a T in place. Off of that T, I would run my cold water line up to my kitchenette, and then I'm ready to connect my sink to this water system. We're not doing that today, so I can keep that in the utility kit back here. The last thing to do is add our vent in line, and that I'm just going to use some clear nylon hose. Because it's just an air vent, I'm not really worried about holding pressure or anything like that. I just want to put this in place. We'll use the hose clamp to hold it on there, and we'll route it out the bottom of the van, out that hole we made a little bit earlier. We have all the easy to get to crimps in place, but now is the time where we've got to think strategically about what we're going to crimp and in what order. Now, because these have this rubber seal against the pump, I can actually take off this manifold, and this is the most complicated piece of our install. I can remove this out of the cabinet, and I can crimp most of this together on the bench, and then come back and crimp one last fitting here inside the van. So we can pull all of this out of here, crimp it all together, and then we can install it and get one crimp in the van and be done. So here we have our manifold complete, and I'm just double checking all my fittings, making sure everything is crimped and ready to go. We have our low pressure side flowing down through the T and into our pump through our pre-filter. And then we have a T there with a ball valve in place so that we can use this as our low point system drain. So now I'm gonna feed this vinyl tube through that hole in the floor. We're gonna get our manifold into place, and we're gonna reattach this to our pump. So it's one last PEX connection here, and our water system is completely plumbed. All of our plumbing is now complete in this project, and we're ready to move on to the electrical. So I have already pre-wired for my pump power, and that's a 12-2 right here. So I'm gonna bring my pump power up to my pump location here. I'm gonna get my water pump switch in place. So this is just a latching lighted water pump switch. I have, of course, a nice switch plate that labels that water pump as it is. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in place and secure that so we can get our wiring done. The wiring on the back of our pump switch has 5 different wires here. So there's a yellow, a blue, a black, a green, and a red. The yellow we're not going to use. That is our normal closed function for this switch. So I just like to tie that around the switch here. I don't want to cut it real short or anything, but if I tie it out of the way, I remember that I don't need it and I don't have to worry about it going forward. The black and the red wires here are going to be the ground and positive for the lighted switch, and that has an LED inside. So we definitely want to wire these up. The green and the blue here are our normal open and our common wire. So I'm going to pull the little tabs off of all of these. I like to ground my common wire together here. So I'm just going to put my blue and black, and we're going to wire those together into one location. Then we can put this on the back of our switch and get our wiring in place. We're going to strip out the power wire so we can expose our positive and ground circuit. Okay, and then we can strip these off so that we can attach them to wire terminals as we go. To make everything wire up super fast here on camera today, we're going to be using Wagos for everything. This is a really great way to put a circuit together. It's also a really great way if you're learning how circuits work. Kind of experiment, and if you make a mistake, you didn't crimp anything solid, so you can just undo terminals and kind of play with it and make sure you get everything right. So I put a Wago 3-way block here on both of the terminals for my power supply. I'm going to go ahead and connect our power from our pump to this because I always like to have my hot lead connected all the time. So I can go ahead and lock that into place. Now I have my pump wire connected to the positive of my circuit. Then I'm going to bring my switch leg and connect it to this. So the thing I'm making up right now is called a switch leg, and this is just a little jumper to go between my power wire and my switch up here. For my switch leg today, I'm using a 14-4 section of wire. That means it's 14 gauge and 4 wires in one bundle. Now I'm only going to use 3 of these wires because it's a pretty simple switch leg. This is going to get the job done, and it's already pre-sheathed in one big sheath, so it makes our job real easy and clean. Okay, now I'm not going to use the white wire of this section. I'm just going to peel the white wire aside and clip that off. And I'm going to strip these wires, so all I have to do is crimp them into the circuit. So let's get this switch leg up and into place. I'm going to bring my 3 wires down here to my pump side, and I'm going to connect my hot leg to the hot first, because this is going to be the simplest leg of the whole circuit. So hot is connected here, and I'm going to connect that up here at my switch. So up here at the switch, I can put in my hot leg of the switch here, and the hot section for my switch leg. The last 2 connections are going to be the separate sides of my actual switch leg. So the way that the ground circuit is going to run is the ground is going to come from my main panel here. The ground is going to run up to my switch. That's where I'm going to combine my grounds, and then it's going to come back and actually ground to the pump itself. So when it's grounding to the pump, that way the circuit is complete and we have power to our pump. If we want to interrupt that circuit, we undo our switch, that breaks that ground, and then we don't have power supplied to the pump. We're going to bring our green wire to our main power supply side here. Black wire is getting connected to our pump. Then up here at our circuit, I have my blue and black wires. Those are going to go into their own sections on the Heiko. And in that last spot on the Heiko, I'm going to bring the black wire from our switch leg. Our wiring is complete and our plumbing is complete. Now is the exciting part, our leak test. So we're going to go ahead and plug in our Aquar system here, turn it on to start filling our tank, and we can give it a second here. We'll fill the tank up, and then we can test the pressure side of our system, make sure we don't have any leaks. Our tank is filled up, and we're ready for our final pressure test. So here we go. And looks like nothing is pouring out into the van, but we're gonna let this thing sit for about 24 hours, make sure there's no surprises or drips waiting for us in the morning. With that, we can test our system out here. So all we have to do is connect our Aquar to our kit and open it up and fill up our water bottle and drink to a job well done. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.